Some truths are too monstrous to speak aloud, too unspeakable to commit to paper. Yet, they exist, whispered in the shadows, written in fear. Accounts of a darkness so profound it threatened to devour the very innocence of a nation. Imagine a place, a seemingly ordinary institution, a credit union, a symbol of community trust. But within its walls, a nightmare was allegedly unfolding. Not just a nightmare of abuse, but a meticulously organized web of depravity. A web, they say, that stretched far beyond any single building, reaching into the highest echelons of power, infiltrating the very fabric of society. Allegations of a secret cabal protected by those sworn to protect us. A scandal so vast, so unthinkable, that when the first whispers emerged, they were met with more than just denial. They were met with a wall of silence, a campaign of intimidation, and something far more insidious. This is The Quiet Curator by Annie, unearthing the hidden truths. This is the story of the Franklin cover-up, a name whispered in hushed tones, a chilling chapter in American history where the fight for justice was met with overwhelming resistance. Could a secret this monstrous truly remain buried? Our journey into this darkness begins in Omaha, Nebraska, with a seemingly innocuous institution, the Franklin Community Federal Credit Union, founded by the seemingly respectable Lawrence E. King, a former Omaha city councilman and politically connected figure. Franklin was meant to be a pillar of community trust, handling millions of dollars for ordinary citizens and local political groups. But in the mid-1980s, the FBI launched an investigation into Franklin, not for what would become its darkest secret, but for prosaic financial fraud. Millions were missing. As investigators peeled back the layers of deception, they stumbled upon something far more sinister, something that would send shockwaves through the very foundations of American society, if only the echoes were allowed to be heard. Among King's employees was a young man named Paul Bonacci. In sworn testimony, Bonacci, who had spent years in King's alleged orbit, began to unravel a story of unimaginable horror. He claimed to have been subjected to, and forced to participate in, sadistic acts of ritualized abuse. Not in isolation, but as part of an organized network, involving powerful, seemingly untouchable individuals. The scale of the alleged depravity was staggering, a ring operating for decades, exploiting countless children, with connections that reached far beyond Omaha's city limits. When I first encountered the raw allegations from the Franklin case, I was struck by the sheer scale of the horror and the immediate, visceral denial that always seems to surround such claims. It's almost as if the human mind recoils from a truth so dark. But if even a fraction of these claims held true, it meant trust itself had been weaponized, and the very innocence of a nation was under attack. This wasn't just a local scandal. It was a wound across the heart of American society. As the initial federal fraud investigation continued, the disturbing allegations of abuse grew too loud to ignore. It was then that a tenacious private investigator named Gary Caradori stepped into the fray. Caradori, a former Omaha police officer with a reputation for unwavering determination, began to follow the threads of Bonacci's testimony. What he found confirmed his gravest fears, a disturbing pattern corroborated by other emerging witnesses, hinting at a network operating with impunity. Caradori's investigation was relentless. He meticulously documented claims, interviewed alleged victims, and attempted to connect the dots between seemingly disparate incidents. His work soon caught the attention of John DeCamp, a formidable attorney, former Nebraska state senator, and a decorated Vietnam War veteran. DeCamp, a man who believed in justice above all else, saw the depth of the corruption and committed himself to exposing what he believed was an insidious truth. He knew the fight would be uphill, but he vastly underestimated the forces they would confront. As Caradori and DeCamp pressed forward, the resistance began. Not just denial, but active, calculated obstruction. Witnesses disappeared, testimonies were recanted under pressure, and Caradori himself reported constant surveillance and threats. The deeper they dug, the more apparent it became. They weren't just fighting a criminal ring, they were allegedly fighting a cover-up protected by individuals in positions of immense power. The silence was deafening, but its message was terrifyingly clear. The allegations rapidly stretched beyond the confines of Omaha. Bonacci and other witnesses claimed the abuse network extended to Washington, D.C., reaching into broader political circles and even military installations. Some testimonies explicitly implicated figures within the intelligence community, suggesting that elements of agencies like the CIA were not just aware, but potentially complicit, using these networks for blackmail, control, or even nefarious experimentation. These were not mere whispers. These were sworn statements, outlining a chilling conspiracy. It's crucial here to distinguish the specific allegations of the Franklin case from the broader satanic panic that swept parts of America in the 1980s. While some of the language used by alleged victims in early media reports borrowed from the sensationalism of ritual abuse claims, the core of the Franklin investigation revolved around documented financial fraud that then uncovered these specific organized claims of sexual abuse. This distinction is vital, as the association with satanic panic would later be used as a powerful tool to discredit the entire investigation. Caradori and DeCamp's work uncovered further testimonies, linking alleged victims and perpetrators to private planes, remote compounds, and high-level social events. It painted a picture of a shadow world operating in plain sight, where the rules of law and morality simply did not apply to a privileged few. The question wasn't just what happened, but who knew, and why was it allowed to continue? By the late 1980s, the allegations surrounding Franklin began to surface in independent media outlets, like The New American. But it was the early 1990s when the story briefly burst into the national spotlight, albeit controversially. Major news programs, like segments on 60 Minutes, attempted to cover the scandal, but often these reports were framed as investigations into the veracity of the claims themselves, quickly shifting from exposing abuse to questioning the sanity and credibility of the alleged victims and investigators. This was the true battle for the narrative. As Caradori and DeCamp pressed for official inquiries, they were met with an intense, orchestrated backlash. Accusations of conspiracy theory became a bludgeon. Investigators were smeared, alleged victims were publicly discredited, and their testimonies dismissed as fantasies or manipulations. The message was clear: question the official narrative, and you risk your reputation, your career, and even your sanity. From a curator's perspective, this phase of the Franklin story is perhaps the most chilling. It's a stark illustration of how powerful institutions can control the narrative, not just by suppressing information, but by actively discrediting those who dare to speak truth to power. The tactics of delegitimization, of labeling any inconvenient truth as a conspiracy theory, became a blueprint for managing public perception in high-stakes scandals. It forces us to ask, how do we discern truth when the very sources of information are under siege? Despite the relentless counter-campaign, legal battles did unfold. Grand jury investigations were convened, primarily in Nebraska, but the outcomes were often perplexing and deeply unsatisfying for those seeking justice for the alleged abuse. Lawrence King, the credit union founder, was indeed convicted for the financial fraud that initiated the investigation, but never for the extensive abuse allegations themselves. Other individuals linked to the claims were never prosecuted for the abuse, or cases collapsed under mysterious circumstances. The legal process, meant to bring clarity and justice, instead became a labyrinth. Accusations of witness tampering, prosecutorial misconduct, and political interference plagued the investigations. The legal system, designed to reveal truth, seemed to hit an invisible wall. Whenever the abuse allegations reached a certain level of political sensitivity, the question lingered: was this simply a case of insufficient evidence, Or was there an orchestrated effort to protect certain powerful individuals at all costs? Decades later, the Franklin cover-up remains a raw wound. For the alleged victims, many of whom faced unimaginable trauma and public scorn, the search for closure continues. Some disappeared. Others struggled with profound psychological scars, their testimonies often dismissed. Gary Caradori himself died under mysterious circumstances. In a plane crash during his investigation, a death officially ruled an accident, but which conspiracy proponents widely attribute to foul play. Despite official debunking and the passage of time, the belief in the Franklin cover-up persists among many. For them, the sheer volume of testimony, the alleged obstruction, and the failure of justice point to a truth too dark for the establishment to acknowledge. It highlights a profound distrust in institutions, a fear that certain secrets are simply too powerful to be fully exposed.